Hey y'all. So tonight we're going to be going back into chapter 8 to do the third video for this chapter. And we're going to be starting the discussion on the traps. If you haven't seen the previous video within this chapter that discusses the story, the red shoes, then I highly recommend you go back and watch that. Like I said, this is the third video in the series for chapter 8. So all of these traps we're going to be discussing will make a lot more sense to you if you go back and watch the video about the story, the red shoes. So I'm staying positive. This is the third attempt at recording this video today. I'm kind of wondering like what's going on. I feel like it's funny because trap number 2 talks about an opposing force. And I feel like there are opposing forces, working against me today to try to get this video out to you all. But I'm not a quitter, so it's going to be late, but it's going to get out there today. Let's dive in. So the first trap is called the gilded carriage, the devalued life. And I looked up the word gilded just to be really sure that I had a good grasp on what this means. And basically, and she's gonna discuss it too, but it's like if you think about gold plated or what's it called? It's not gold flake. There's something else where it's like a gold overlay, I think, where something looks, valuable and flashy and attractive on the outside, but once you scratch the surface, it's really worthless. And so that's the meaning when she says the gilded carriage. And then, of course, she relates that to the devalued life. So let's start reading and then we'll get into our discussion. It says, in archetypal symbolism, the carriage is a literal image, a conveyance that carries something from one place to another. In modern dream material and contemporary folklore, it has been mostly supplanted by the automobile, which has the same archetypal feel to it. And so she basically says that it's symbolic of a part of the psyche, like a mood in the psyche, she says, that transports us from one place within the psyche to another, from one idea to another, from one thought to another, and from one endeavor to another. So she says, climbing into the old woman's gilded carriage, in the story, is very similar to entering the gilded cage. It supposedly offers something more comfortable, less stressful, but in effect it captures instead. So it's a trap, it's a snare. It entraps in a way that is not immediately perceivable. Since guilt, G-I-L-T, guilt, tends to be so dazzling at first. So imagine we are going down the road of our own lives in our handmade shoes, and a mood comes over us, something like this. She's got this in quotes, maybe something else would be better, something that isn't so difficult, something that takes less time, energy, and striving. So we know that good things take time. And, when you look at the story through the lens of narcissism, that's what narcissists do. They use any kind of avenue, any kind of doorway they can to lure us in. And it might look like, if we're, like it says, maybe something else would be better, something that isn't so difficult, something that takes less time, energy, and striving. So you have to know who you are. You have to be really strong in who you are. You have to really be strong in your values and what matters to you. Things like being impatient or having fear of some kind or any kind of like a lack mindset in any way where there's weak areas within yourself, within your just your grasp on your own life, your sovereignty, any kind of areas like that, any vulnerabilities. A narcissist is going to hone in on those and use those against you. They're going to use that in a manner to exploit and take advantage of you and ensnare you and possibly entrap you into, some kind of commitment, a business commitment, a relationship of some sort. So you just really have to, the girl was happy in the story, the young girl. She was just her authentic self, going along. She had made her clothes, her shoes were handmade, and from the outside world, this is important. We're going to get into this. It looked like she was, poor, and people may have felt sorry for her, but she was happy. She was content, and so let's read a little bit further here. She talks about, how all the different ways that we can be seduced, basically, and temptations and things like that. Um, it says the price is the trap. The trap is sprung when the child goes to live with a rich old woman. There she must remain proper and silent, no overt yearning allowed, and more specifically, no fulfillment of that yearning. This is the beginning of soul famine for the creative spirit. And that's just exactly what it is. Once you've entered into that gilded carriage and you've gotten involved in a narcissistic entanglement, it's like that fire inside of us starts to kind of dwindle down, and our spirit starts to feel like it's getting snuffed out. It's just like because they're just so overpowering, with the condescension, with the gaslighting that they do, where it makes you totally question your reality, what you see with your own eyes and ears. And it starts to tear apart that bond you have within yourself, to your intuition, and the trust you have in yourself and in your own perceptions and your own gut. So, that's on purpose. But when you're in it, you don't know this is really happening. And so it just gets worse and worse until you wake up and realize what's going on, all right? So it says many educated people smile indulgently when they hear that primitive people have endless lists of experiences and events that they feel can steal their souls away from them, from sighting a bear at the wrong time of year to entertaining a house that has not yet been blessed after a death occurred there. Though much in modern culture is wondrous and life-giving, it also has more wrong-time bears and unblessed places of the dead in a square block than throughout 1,000 square miles of outback. The central psychic fact remains that our connection to meaning, passion, soulfulness, and the deep nature is something we have to keep watch over, because that's what the narcissist severs. That's my little addition to that there. There are many things that try to force, sweep, seduce away those handmade shoes. Seeming simple things, like saying, later, I'll do that dance. Planting, hugging, finding, planning, learning, peacemaking, cleansing, later, traps, all. So sometimes, excuse me, sometimes the trap that harms the connection with our self and what we know to be true is internal. Sometimes this is all, just like everything that she explains in this book, it can be like a dual lesson for us. A lot of these things are just can be seen as processes within our own psyche, like self-sabotaging type things, self-defeating type thoughts and behaviors. And then also you can apply externally to people who are working to sabotage our peace and our self-assurance and our alignment with our own guiding force and things like that. So trap number 2 is called the dry old woman, the senescent force. In dream and fairy tale interpretation, whoever owns the conveyor of attitudes, the gilded carriage, is understood as the main value pressing down upon the psyche, forcing it forward, locomoting it in the direction it pleases. In this case, the values of the old woman who owns the carriage begin to drive the psyche. So this is like symbolic of the narcissist taking over your mind, taking over your perceptions, In classical Jungian psychology, the archetypal figure of the elder is sometimes called a senex force. In Latin, senex means old man. More properly, and without the gender attribution, the symbol of the elder can be understood as the senescent force, that which acts in a way that is peculiar to the aged. In fairy tales, this aged force is personified by an old person who is often portrayed as one-sided in some way, indicating that one's psychic process is also developing in a one-sided manner. Ideally, an old woman symbolizes dignity, mentoring, wisdom, self-knowledge, tradition-bearing, well-defined boundaries, and experience, with a good dose of crabby, long-toothed, straight-talking, flirtatious sass thrown in for good measure. I like the way she writes. It's always entertaining. But when an old fairy tale woman uses these attributes negatively, as in the Red Shoes, the story, we are forewarned that aspects of the psyche that should remain warm are about to be frozen in time. Something normally vibrant within the psyche is about to be starched flat, given a drubbing, or distorted beyond recognition. Essentially, she talks about frozen. It says, aspects of the psyche that should remain warm are about to be frozen in time. And, it reminds me of the trauma responses. I think it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There may be others. But, I think about the freeze response. And that's something that I have some experience with. Although at the time I didn't really know what to label it. But, when you're caught up with a narcissist and you've essentially been gaslit so much, and you've been dealing with so much condescension, it's kind of like, and you're confused because you're consistently giving this person the benefit of the doubt. It's kind of like you don't know what to do from there. And so you do kind of freeze up. And I think that it's in that freezing up that that light inside of you starts to dwindle. You start to doubt yourself. And it's just almost like your spirit is dying, really. And so let's read a little bit further in because it gets richer. It says, as we see in the tale, being taken in by the old woman, rather than dignifying the new, which will be the young girl, she's the new, allows the senescent attitude to destroy innovation. Rather than mentoring her ward, the old woman will attempt to calcify her. There's another word, in addition to frozen, is calcifying. It's like, I think that's a great term, because it's almost like a deterioration of sorts. It's like being frozen, but in such a way that it's destructive. And I definitely think that this is a battle of opposing forces. And I think that's why a lot of people that come out of narcissistic entanglements, discuss this in light of a spiritual battle, because that's exactly how it feels. And I believe that's what it is. So it says, the old woman in this tale is not a sage, but rather is dedicated to repetition of a single value without experimentation or renewal. So she's very rigid. This old lady in the tale, she's very rigid. She's very status conscious. If you remember, the girl is wanting to wear the new red shoes because the lady had, thrown her beloved handmade red shoes in the fire because they were dirty and not appropriate or up to par, according to her. So the young girl was excited about her new red shoes, and the old lady didn't, want her. Once she found out that they were red, she was embarrassed. All the people in the church were talking about it. So, narcissists are very image oriented, and they expect you to, fall into line with keeping their image up too. And so it's just almost like a prison type situation, when you're in these relationships. So then she just kind of expands on in this story, and the symbolism of control, one person really just very much controlling another. And then she says to follow such a lifeless value system causes loss of soul linkage in the extreme. Excuse me. And yes, and that's why it's important that we stay strong in who we are, in our beliefs and our values, and keeping that strong grasp on our own intuition. And I think that all of this is going to get stronger and more developed anyway as we go through life and have experiences. We're going to develop maturity in this manner, and also especially discernment. Discernment is, I think, what a lot of us focus on after the fact. We may have thought that we had a good grasp on who we are and what we want, but we didn't have a good grasp on how other people operate, because we made the mistake of thinking everybody thinks like us. Everybody has good intentions. Everybody's honest. So you make these mistakes, in the beginning, and then when you find out it's not true, then you realize you've got to work on that discernment piece. And that's just another piece of the puzzle as you mature, is your wisdom throughout life. So it says, regardless of collective affiliations or influences, our challenge in behalf of the wild soul and our creative spirit is to not merge with any collective, but to distinguish ourselves from those who surround us, building bridges back to them as we choose. We decide which bridges will become strong and well-traveled and which will remain sketchy and empty. And the collectives we favor with relationship will be those that offer the most support for our soul and creative life. And so she's describing connections with others and calling them bridges. And I would say, obviously, some bridges you're going to want to destroy. You're going to want to blow up when you realize that they're destructive for your soul, for you, and your well-being. And that's just it. You learn someone who is for you is going to stoke and kindle that fire within you and want you to be sure of yourself. They're going to want that for you to have a firm and keep a firm grasp on what is good for you as an individual, your authenticity, your individuality, your sovereignty. They're not going to want to get in there and, break all that up and muddy it up and trying to mold you into, their agenda, essentially. And so I like how we can learn and validate ourselves, through this story, because it's so closely aligned with the experience, of being with a narcissist. It says, she talks about, let's see, about in the story, how it's important to keep your grasp on yourself and not to be influenced by others, is what she's talking about next. And she says, that one that does not put forth effort to challenge or encourage this person in any positive manner, then her ability to thrive and create is diminished. So it's also important not only that we're encouraged by people that are for us, but that we're challenged too. And I think that you can tell when constructive criticism or, a harsh truth that we need to hear is coming from a place of love. You can tell, versus if it's coming from a narcissist, because you're going to look at it and say, what is this person's desired outcome? Is their desired outcome self-serving for that person, or is it actually beneficial to me? And because it's true what the Bible says, the iron sharpens iron. And so we have to be able to distinguish that. That's just part of that mature discernment that we're going to be developing, as we grow. It says, the more harsh the circumstances, the more she is exiled to assaulted barrens where nothing is allowed to grow. And that's when you've been entangled, for a long time in a very negative environment with a narcissist or several narcissists, and you've just been exposed to these, harsh conditions for so long, it's sometimes we beat ourselves up that we're not thriving and flourishing in an environment like that. But we shouldn't expect ourselves to thrive and flourish in an environment like that. We need to change the environment. We need to get ourselves out of an environment like that into a healthy, supportive, and nourishing environment. That's what we need to do. So it says the separation of a woman's life and mind from flattened out collective thinking and the development of her unique talents are among the most important accomplishments a woman can fashion. Yes. Distinguishing yourself from others, really knowing yourself, knowing what matters to you. Because the stronger you are in yourself, the stronger grasp you have on your values and your beliefs and what makes you you, then the more resistant you're going to be to a narcissist influence and takeover, in my opinion. And so, we can learn from these entanglements, where our weak parts were. And we can, look back only for the purpose of making sure that we have strengthened those areas in ourselves that were weak. And so we're just growing. We're growing as a person, and we're maturing, and we're getting stronger. And I think it's all going to pay off, It's got to. It's got to. When you invest in yourself, it's going to be beneficial for you and for those who you choose, like she talks about the bridges, and for those who you choose to share your life with in some manner. So that's how you give back to yourself and to others. It says, however, in the tale, the child acquiesces to the old woman's dry values. So she just kind of forfeits, her light inside, her authenticity, her personal truths and joy and everything. She just forfeits that to this controlling yet dry, she calls it dry, old woman. It says the child becomes feral then, moving from a natural state to a captured one. Soon she will be tossed into the wilds of the diabolical red shoes, but without innate sensing and unable to perceive the dangers. If we remove ourselves from our real and passionate lives and enter the gilded carriage of the dry old woman, in effect, we adopt the persona and ambitions of the brittle old perfectionist. That's a powerful statement right there. So the first thing that has to happen is, it says, if we remove ourselves from our real and passionate lives. So there has to become a betrayal. An internal betrayal of ourselves, an internal abandonment of ourselves. That's the first thing that happens. And I think that, sometimes we don't realize this is happening. We're so focused on this other person for various reasons, but ultimately it's all a manipulation. It's all smoke and mirrors. But that, if you're breaking it down, that's what it is. She says, if we remove ourselves from our real and passionate lives, that's what I'm saying. You got to have a strong grasp on yourself first. And the person and people who are right for you are not going to want you to abandon yourself. They're not going to want that. It says, because then enter the gilded carriage of the dry old woman. In effect, we adopt the persona and ambitions of the brittle old perfectionist. So if you look at a narcissist, they're empty. A lot of people describe them like robots or empty shells. They're never satisfied. They're in constant pursuit of thrills, material things. It's like they're just living totally in the future. They can never fill their own cup, their own bucket. It's never satisfied. And you, on the other hand, remember the young girl in the story, she was content. She seemed and looked poor to the outside world, in her handmade clothes and shoes out of rags, and scraps, but she was content. She was had her peace and joy. But that's what makes you different. And I personally think that narcissists are jealous of that. I think they see that in us, that light inside of us, that peace. And they're jealous of that because it's something they'll never have. And so, and yes, you can go down, a rabbit hole of trying to figure out why and what made them that way, but that's not what my channel's about. And I personally feel like if you've already expended, time being caught up with someone like that, I think it's good to focus on the here and now and your future, except for, obviously, growing and learning and discernment, maturing your discernment and all that. So, but we don't want to turn into them. It says, when she abandons herself, essentially, if we remove ourselves from our real and passionate lives and enter the gilded carriage of the dry old woman, in effect, we adopt the persona and ambitions of the brittle old perfectionist. We don't want to become empty. We don't want to become lifeless. We don't want that spark inside of us to be snuffed completely out and become this hollow shell of a person the way they are. Excuse me. That's because then it's almost like, a disease that's spreading, like, that's killing souls, your spirit. And we don't want that. So, even if you just have a tiny spark left, you want to hold tight to that, because keeping your passion inside of you, it makes you beautiful. To have that passion for life, to not become dead to your emotions, but to know how to use them wisely and with whom. And that's where it is. And so it says, then like all captured creatures, we fall into a sadness that leads to an obsessive yearning, kind of like what I described with a narcissist, right? Often characterized as the restlessness with no name. Yes, they're very restless. Thereafter, we are at risk of seizing the first thing that promises to make us feel alive again. It is important to keep our eyes open and to carefully weigh offers of an easier existence, a trouble-free path, especially if in exchange we are asked to surrender our personal creative joy to a cremating fire rather than enkindling one of our own making. Yes. So, do narcissists create narcissists? Do narcissists turn people into narcissists? I don't know. But I do know that, if you're entangled with them for too long in a personal manner, they certainly have an effect on you, and it certainly feels like that life force inside of you just dwindles down to, a tiny little bitty flame. And it's just our job to rekindle that and make sure that we don't totally forfeit, all those beautiful qualities that we have. Hope and faith and passion and contentment and peace, and the ability to experience contentment and peace in the simple things in just life itself. And so I'm very passionate that people, are able to free themselves and to, grow and learn and develop some good discernment to never go through this again. And I just hope that for all of us. And so, because life's for living, and I don't want them to win. I don't want a narcissist to win, because if you come out of the entanglement and you are a shell of yourself, and all of that passion and joy and peace inside of you is gone, then they've won. So the work is important, whatever it is that you need to do for your healing and to grow and mature in your understanding, your wisdom, and your discernment. It's all worthwhile, because life is there, and So, trap number 3 we're going to get into next time is called Burning the Treasure, Soul Famine, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like I had some great commentary from the previous recordings that I did today, and I just sometimes it just feels like there's one thing after another. You know what I mean? That comes up against your efforts, but it just reminds me of like what we just talked about, this opposing force, and I'm just like, it's not going to win, you know. And I'm not a quitter. So thank you guys for coming along with me. I hope that you got something out of this. And I look forward to continuing this journey and going further into chapter 8 with you all. And so have a beautiful day. And I will see you soon.